to watch the circus that was the WNBA All-Star game. I've said this a few times. Caitlin Clark, she tried to give the fans what they paid for. Marina Mabrey, she tried to give the fans what they paid for.
The entire landscape of professional women's basketball just shifted on its axis, and if you blinked during the past 72 hours, you missed the precise moment a multi-million-dollar narrative completely shattered into a million pieces. There's a war happening right now in the public eye, a relentless collision between raw, unadulterated athletic dominance and the staggering weight of viral hubris that has finally reached its absolute boiling point. For months, we have watched the goalposts move, the media narratives twist, and the social media timelines erupt over who truly owns the crown of the modern era. But what happened this past week did not just settle a debate, it vaporized it. The gap between what is being claimed in press conferences and what is actually happening on the hardwood has widened into a Grand Canyon of embarrassment, and the internet has officially run out of patience for the excuses.
The question that I have for them and the question that I have for Kathy Engelbert and all of the players in the WNBA, is that really how you guys want to be represented? Is that 3.2 million people tuned in and that's what they saw? An absolute disaster of a game? Now I see a lot of celebrations at 3.2. You want to know why it was up so much compared to last year? Because a certain 22 was out.
To understand how we got here, you have to look at the sheer velocity of what Caitlin Clark just pulled off across a brutal, unforgiving 3-city road trip that tested every fiber of her physical and mental endurance. While the rest of the league was catching their breath during the thick of the grueling schedule, Clark was busy rewriting the history books, capturing her third WNBA Player of the Week, honor of the season, and cementing her status as the fastest player in league history to cross the astronomical threshold of 1,500 career points and 650 assists. Let that number sink in for a second. We are talking about a rookie contract point guard who is not merely putting up empty scoring stats on a volume-heavy usage rate. She is orchestrating an entire offensive system, locking down opponents, and doing it against completely contrasting defensive schemes thrown at her by Seattle, Portland, and Minnesota.
The viewership is out. The ratings are... Can we stop lumping Angel Reese into the Caitlin Clark? Like when we're talking about the actual growth of the game, now that we are 3 years removed away from that rookie class, can we come to the understanding that Angel Reese doesn't deserve nearly as much credit as she got?
While Clark was systematically dismantling opposing defenses with surgical precision, her primary rival in the media circus, Angel Reese, was enduring a week that can only be described as a public relations disaster of epic proportions. Only weeks after dropping the jaw-dropping self-comparison to Michael Jordan, claiming she is the Michael Jordan of the WNBA, Reese walked straight into a buzzsaw of reality that left internet investigators and basketball purists absolutely stunned. Jordan famously let his 6 championship rings speak for themselves in press conferences, never needing to defend a single legacy claim, because the hardware did the talking. Reese, on the other hand, found herself trapped in a sequence of viral lowlights that played out on national television like a tragic comedy. It started during All-Star weekend when Las Vegas Aces star Aaliyah Wilson delivered a moment that has since been burned into the collective memory of every sports fan on the internet. Reese drove hard to the rim, looking to assert her presence in the paint, only to
ask about 2 moments. Have you ever blocked a shot that you didn't mean to block?
Right. Angel was not supposed to do that. I was trying to get out of the way. I do not like to block shots during All-Star games because what am I doing? So yeah, no, I've never had that happen to me, and I'm so sorry.
to have her shot cleanly, effortlessly, and completely rejected by Wilson, who stood flat-footed on the floor without even jumping an inch. Not a small hop, not a subtle elevation off the parquet, nothing. Wilson simply raised her hand like she was swatting away a fly while waiting for an elevator, and the resulting block immediately flooded social media feeds in both real time and slowed down replay agony. To make matters exponentially worse, later in that exact same game, Reese suffered a completely unforced non-contact tumble, getting her own legs tangled up and hitting the floor with nobody within arm's reach. turning a routine transition into a physical stumble that had cameras flashing from every angle in the arena. And as if the on-court nightmares weren't enough to handle, the off-court optics delivered a knockout blow that no amount of spin doctoring could fix. Former President Barack Obama made a guest appearance at the event, purposefully walking past the gathered crowd to pull Caitlin Clark aside for a genuine, highly publicized conversation. Cameras captured the former president smiling, shaking her hand, and offering words of encouragement, explicitly telling her not to let the outside noise get to her and treating her like the undisputed center of the basketball universe.
One of the things that was luckiest for me was I didn't get famous till I was like 45.
Standing mere feet away in the direct line of sight was Reese, completely ignored, out of the frame, and reduced to staring down at her phone screen while history happened right next to her. The split-screen image was all it took. Within minutes, the internet had already declared a winner, pairing the presidential pep talk with Reese's awkward isolation into a viral meme that spread faster than wildfire. The avalanche did not stop there, because right as the video clips of the block and the fall were hitting peak engagement numbers, legitimate institutional pressure began mounting behind the scenes. Reports surfaced tying Reese to external scrutiny regarding betting activities connected to her matchups, introducing a level of legal and operational oversight that moves far beyond standard internet trolling into the dangerous territory of real-world compliance and brand risk.
At All-Star Weekend, you and Angel made a bet with each other on this game. Is that bet still?
This is how the rich stay rich.
This
You
is how
gotta,
the rich
you
get
gotta
rich.
save. You gotta save this money. I'm gonna see you next week on Wednesday.
Yeah.
At night?
No, at practice.
Oh, at practice? I mean, I know y'all gonna lose, but if y'all lose,
I
You pay-
get to have that.
if y'all win, you get 400.
I get 400.
If
And if we lose, then you get to keep.
no, you owe me 400. Bet I'm standing on that.
When you combine a flat-footed block, a self-inflicted fall, a presidential snub, and a looming investigative cloud into a single 72-hour window, you are no longer dealing with a normal bad week. You're watching a complete unraveling of a carefully constructed media persona. Meanwhile, 3 cities away, Caitlin Clark was treating defensive adjustments like a chess grandmaster playing against novices. First came Portland, where Clark engineered a historic triple-double, putting up double-digit points, assists, and rebounds in a masterclass of total court control that typically belongs to bruising centers dominating the glass, not guards running the point. Then came Seattle, where she torched the defense for 32 points on a hyper-efficient 9 of 14 shooting night. Analysts did not just call it a good game. They flagged it as a statistical anomaly of efficiency because scoring 32 points on just 14 shots means the defense had virtually zero answers for her movement, her pace, and her execution. Minnesota tried to throw a completely different look at her, sitting back in a restrictive zone designed to dare anyone to shoot over the top, and Clark simply solved the puzzle on the fly, keeping her weekly averages locked in at an astonishing 25 points, 9 assists, and 5 rebounds across the entire gauntlet. What separates a genuinely elite player from a temporary flash in the pan, however, is not just what they do on the stat sheet, but how their presence impacts the ecosystem around them. Look at the Indiana Fever roster during this exact stretch, and you see an entirely different culture built on shared accountability and collective elevation. Aaliyah Boston controlled the paint with authority, cleaning up the glass and anchoring the defense. Kelsey Mitchell kept knocking down high-percentage shots off the catch the exact second a defense dared to help off her. Lexi Hall locked down opposing scorers possession after possession without needing a microphone or a headline to validate her contribution. And off the bench, Sophie Cunningham brought that infectious, high-octane energy that routinely swings momentum in the fourth quarter when tired legs start failing everyone else. None of these players were suffocated or buried under Clark's high-usage role. Instead, they all elevated their game, proving that true leadership makes everyone around them better rather than shrinking them into the background. The contrast became even more glaring when Reese's team took the floor against Las Vegas and suffered a brutal, humiliating 22-point blowout loss that ran them completely off their own home floor from the opening quarter onward. The Aces did not deploy complex defensive wizardry, they simply played with pace, forced the ball out of Reese's hands early in the shot clock, switched everything on the perimeter and dared anyone else on that roster to beat them off the dribble. Nobody could. The box score might have shown a flurry of rebounds late in the game when the margin was already out of reach, but anyone who watched the game live understood the brutal truth. Stats accumulated during a blowout loss do not build a legacy. They merely pad a stat sheet that nobody remembers by the time summer turns to fall. Following that devastating loss, The boiling point finally spilled over during a media session where Reese was directly asked about her ongoing feud with the narrative and why she continues to miss out on the accolades being heaped onto her peers. Her response was not a reflection on team execution or defensive breakdown. Instead, she openly pointed fingers at the media, accusing the establishment of bias and explicitly calling Clark privileged. She claimed that the reason she keeps getting skipped over for Player of the Week honors has nothing to do with basketball metrics, efficiency ratings, or win-loss records, but everything to do with favoritism and systemic media preference.
She went from Chicago to Atlanta, and outside of the fake race hoax with Sandy Brondello, no one's really talked about Angel Reese at all this year. Outside of her walking into WNBA All-Star game looking like a hot mess, Angel Reese has pretty much been out of sight, out of mind ever since the season started, and she's been playing in Atlanta. Last year's game drew 2.19 million viewers on ABC, previously the second most watched WNBA All-Star game, and was down 36% from the previous year.
The timing of that statement could not have been more disastrous for her public standing. Dropping a claim about media bias right on the heels of a 22-point blowout loss, and mere days after Clark secured a historic triple-double and a 32-point masterclass across 3 hostile cities, transformed what could have been a principled debate about sports media into an embarrassing display of sour grapes. Fans and analysts instantly lined up the quote against the raw data, and the argument crumbled into dust. A basketball stat sheet does not care about your social media following, your interview cadence, or your narrative framing. It simply records what happens when the ball goes through the net. The corporate sponsorship landscape has begun to reflect this widening chasm just as brutally as the box scores. While Caitlin Clark commands massive, multi-year endorsement partnerships with global powerhouses like Nike, Gatorade, State Farm, and Wilson, brands that build long-term campaigns around consistency, reliability, and unquestioned performance, Reese's retail presence with Reebok has faced persistent reports of discounted shelving with products marked down in stores rather than flying off them at full price. Brands are risk-averse entities. They do not chase transient social media storylines or viral drama cycles. They invest heavily in athletes who show up every single night, perform at an elite level, and credit their teammates when the final buzzer sounds. When you look at the broader cultural conversation surrounding women's basketball, there is undoubtedly a valid, nuanced discussion to be had about how sports media covers diverse athletes, how narratives are built, and how fandoms interact with players online. That is a real conversation that deserves thoughtful, mature dialogue. But there is a massive, unbridgeable chasm between having an honest conversation about sports media and using systemic talking points as an emotional shield to deflect away from a 22-point blowout loss and a glaring personal performance gap on the court. Trying to dress up a post-game excuse in the clothing of a social justice dialogue is transparent to anyone paying attention, and it is precisely why public sentiment swung so decisively away from the excuses and toward the players who let their game do the talking. As the season marches relentlessly toward its climax and teams position themselves for the stretch run, this psychological and statistical divide is only going to widen. The foundational difference between these two distinct factions comes down to accountability versus deflection, team-first synergy versus individual spotlight chasing, and cold, hard data versus loud, empty rhetoric. The numbers settled this entire debate long before the microphone was even turned on. A triple-double in Portland, surgical efficiency in Seattle, locked-in leadership across 3 different cities, and a supporting cast that thrives under pressure versus a 22-point home blowout, unforced floor tumbles, flat-footed rejections, and defensive complaints about privilege. The ledger has been written, the receipts have been permanently stamped, and the internet has officially rendered its verdict. The debate is over, the crown has found its undisputed owner, and anyone still trying to rewrite the script from the sidelines is simply screaming into a void that has already moved on without them.